It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, what is going on?
It's Friday. It's not Friday, but it's Thursday, but it's a Saturday game, so it's Friday. And also, like, no one's really working anywhere all week, so it feels like a Friday. So I don't know what to call this day. Do we need a new name for when
Friday
is really Friday?
Yeah, like Friday.
It's like, it's like, oh, well, it's like today's your birthday. Well, it's Tuesday, but it's also your birthday. Like, there needs to be another name for the day when the Thursday is really, for all intents and purposes, a Friday. Early Friday, pre-Friday, Friday Eve, maybe. It is technically Friday Eve.
Now I don't even know what day it actually is.
It's Thursday, December 21st. I'm Mike Wallace, and this is 60. We're way.
Yeah, I don't know how we got to this point already, but it is Thursday, December 21st, 2023, and Mason Rudolph is the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kenny Pickett was rolled out today by the team. In a matter of 48 hours, I would say, my mind completely changed about who was going to be starting this game. I thought, like, early in the week when he wasn't rolled out, and then I saw Kenny practicing, I was like, oh, like, limited capacity on Tuesday, maybe we do see Kenny actually get out there and give it a go. Yesterday, you kind of tempered that expectation, and my mind had shifted after seeing the video of him limited mobility to the point where I thought it would be Mason and then Kenny getting rolled out today. So it will be Mason Rudolph starting at quarterback. That is going to take up a big portion of our conversation, Alan. So maybe save that. But Trenton Thompson also rolled out at safety, which means per our Nick Farabaugh, it will actually be you and I starting at safety in 2 days for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I'm going to take the strong safety because I can't really run that well. So, like, there's no chance I'm covering Higgins. I can maybe like trip Joe Mixon, right? Like, I'm not going to tackle him. I could just maybe get in the way and he would trip over me. But covering just straight out. Like, I'm a pure box safety at this point in my career. So you're going to get center field, and good luck with that. We'll see how it goes.
I don't like the chances. I'll be quite honest with you. I'd like to have a lot more confidence in myself. And in a lot of aspects of life, I do. This would not be one of them, having to play in an NFL game like this. So no. But anyway, on a serious note, they're down at least their top 4 safeties. Elijah Riley, who would be their 5th, is questionable to play in this game. He would be coming off IR and playing in his first game in a month. If he is able to come back and play next to Patrick Peterson, who is a corner that is going to play safety in this one. Alan, the safety room has somehow overtaken the inside linebacker room for the most depleted on this roster, and that's saying something.
Yeah, we're right to Dumb and Dumber. Our pets' heads are falling off. Like, that's where we're at here. I mean, so Patrick Peterson is going to play free safety. Eric Rowe, who has never played for the Steelers and is not really a strong safety by trade anyway, is going to play strong safety. He's an 8-year NFL vet. He's played lots of places and lots of schemes. But, man, this is going to be a very big challenge for this defense, and there's next to no depth. If Elijah Riley doesn't play, you're just left with Miles Killebrew. There isn't another safety. That's it. That's the list.
Yeah.
Kornheiser. There's nobody else. I think Nick talked to Riley today. I think he's pretty confident he's going to play. So, I think those are your 4 safeties, but yikes. That's interesting.
Darius Rush maybe get a helmet, could see time there. Would he play I think he played 8 of his snaps at safety in that Thursday game against the Titans.
Darius Rush played safety? No,
he played. Well, they had. Okay, well, we can continue to talk about it because somebody had him tracked as 40 snaps in that game, and some of them were at safety. And that's why I brought it up. But
he was the dime defender, the the slot dime defender for a lot of it. I expect he will have that role again this week. I think you're going to see so look, I mean, the 3 safety package is kind of out the window. You only have 3 of them, right? But Riley kind of does both. He's a safety and he's a slot corner. So I think when you're looking at nickel, it'll be, Levi Wallace is going to start at one side. Joey Porter Jr. is going to start at the other. Patrick Peterson, Eric Rowe. When you go nickel, it'll be Shannon Sullivan or Elijah Riley. And then when you go dime, it'll be one of those 2 guys and probably Darius Rush.
Yeah. Well, so he definitely gave you the helmet. I don't know why. I swear that I saw that on PFF's tracking, but
well, if it's on PFF, it's
there.
probably wrong anyway. So
yeah, that's true.
That's
anyway,
that's a lie. They're actually very good at that part of their job.
Wow, that was very big of you to say. I appreciate that.
I take my shots when they're justified only.
Okay, but moving along here, I'm very interested to see, like we talked about it before, Cincinnati, you have a pretty good feel what they're going to do offensively. Like even without Jamar Chase, you're going to see a lot of 3 receiver stuff, 1 running back, 1 tight end. So from that standpoint, the Steelers are very familiar with the personnel that they want to throw out there. Do you think that kind of, at least that is in their favor, that they know what they're going to see?
Well, I think it gives you the benefit of not needing a lot of packages. When you have like a very multiple offense, like think about like the Baltimore Ravens, where they'll come at you with like a fullback and 2 tight ends or 2 running backs on the field at the same time. And, 4 wide receivers sometimes. Like you got to have answers for all that. The Bengals don't really do that much, right? I mean, there's no Jamar Chase, so you're going to have T. Higgins and 1 outside receiver. I guess it's a question as to what they'll do with the other. My guess is that Tyler Boyd will move outside because to me, I think the Bengals have better depth at the slot. I really, really like the rookie Andre Yoshivas from Princeton. He can be a pain in the butt. Trenton Irwin, as a guy who's been around, is like their version of Gunnar Olszewski, basically. Plays a lot of special teams, but also can be a slot receiver. So I think those 2 guys are going to play a lot, and you'll see them on the field with Higgins and Boyd. And then you're going to see, Drew Sample and Tanner Hudson at tight end and Joe Mixon and Chase Brown at running back. But it's mostly going to be 3 receivers at tight end and running back on the field at the same time. And that really does make matching personnel a whole lot easier for the defense.
Yeah. I keep going back to this, sorry, because I wanted to find this for sure. But yeah, so it was Darius Rush had 30 snaps, 6 in the box, 18 slot corner, 1 wide corner, and 5 free safety.
Yeah.
This is what he's tracked for. So I don't know how that works, but
anyway, they do those snaps where like they rotate the slot corner and the free safety. So maybe but he would have still lined up at slot corner. He's just moving, after the snap. So I don't know.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. But Alan, the big storyline here, as depleted as the safety room is, probably what's going to be taking most of the headlines here is the quarterback room again. Maybe for a brief window, it looked like Kenny Pickett could potentially return, but never really looked like he was going to be mobile enough to do so. So Mason Rudolph's going to get a shot here on Saturday against Cincinnati, which I want to bring up this. I feel like I have to bring up this one. Are you familiar with Daniel Valente?
Yes.
He puts out the weird stats that he puts out. So Mason Rudolph has only 1 career loss versus teams named after cats. Okay. Are you ready for this? 2-0 versus the Cincinnati Bengals, 2-0 versus the Pitt Panthers, 1-0 versus the Southeastern Louisiana Lions, 1-0 versus the South Alabama Jaguars, 2-1 versus the Kansas State Wildcats, in a tie versus the Detroit Lions. So, hey, you know what? I think that we're good to go on Saturday with Mason Rudolph facing a team named after a cat. That's what I take from this.
All right. I mean, did we get high school in there? I mean, did we like how?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, no, that's not in here. Daniel's not on his A game with this one. He didn't go that far back.
I mean, come on. What the heck?
Also, though,
I do appreciate that, though. That is an incredible stat.
Is this okay? I feel even better now thinking about this. The last time Mason Rudolph started a game was against the Lions, right? The Ben COVID game. And isn't that like isn't Godwin Igwebuike that he went off in that game for the Lions against the Steelers.
Yes.
There we go. All right. Now on the Steelers. He's going to be at Acrisure Stadium. This is all pointing in the right direction for me right now, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, that's the last thing we really have to go on from Mason Rudolph, and it's not all bad. I mean, that's the only game that he's played that was in this offensive system, right? Matt Canada was the offensive coordinator. And I think, it's hard to compare what Rudolph did when he was in Randy Fichtner's offense, when the Steelers were like the most pass heavy team in the NFL, compared to this offense, which seems to be allergic to it. But that game is the one we really can look at and say, like, okay, this is probably the kind of quarterback play we should expect to get from Mason Rudolph. And if you remember that game, it was raining and the Steelers threw the ball 50 times.
Yes.
Which it did go into overtime, into the very end of overtime. So there's a whole extra period there, but man, what an interesting game. He completed 70% of them, 242 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. I feel like they can get, now they're not going to throw 50 times. They may not run 50 offensive snaps. But I think they can get that kind of performance out of Mason Rudolph. I think it's in him. I don't think he can be much better than that, but I think he can deliver that kind of game. Now, will that kind of game be good enough to win? I don't know. It wasn't good enough to beat a winless Detroit Lions team in week 10 of the season. These Bengals are playing pretty well. That's a multifaceted question, but I think he can deliver that kind of performance.
Yeah, what's weird is, you mentioned running 50 plays. So they passed 50 times this game, if I'm correct. Yeah, they also ran 31. So it's not like it was. Of course, they shouldn't have been. That is heavily pass as opposed to run, but 81 between passing and running plays, which is crazy to think about that many plays being run by this team.
Yeah,
they scored 16 points.
It's not even like it was like some kind of offensive outburst. It was just they ran a lot of play. I just did the snap counts for last week, and it's 42 or whatever.
Jeez, yeah. But I do think you're right.
50,
This
52,
is the
50. No,
52.
No, it was more than that. 58 snaps last week.
Okay. I do think you're right in terms of this is probably a good benchmark to look at. Obviously not the attempts, but the completion percentage. He threw a touchdown in this game, which is the very first drive to James Washington, and then nothing really after that. But the pick, right? That's always going to be the biggest thing because this offense is so predicated on not turning the football over. He did have one in that football game. They need him to take care of the football. That is arguably the biggest reason that Mitch Trubisky is not out there anymore, is because of his his carelessness with the football. So I think that is probably the one big thing going from Mitch to Mason that needs to change, is taking care of the football.
I think it's the thing. Although, and I think, people watched a lot of Mitch over these last few weeks, and obviously it hasn't gone well, but Mitch in his Steelers time in 2 seasons has thrown an interception on 3.5% of his dropbacks. That's the worst. That would be the worst in NFL history. If you extrapolated that over a season, it's not going to take a lot to be better than that. And in fact, this year was 4.7% of his dropbacks. So it's not going to take a lot from Rudolph to be better than Trubisky in terms of taking care of the ball. And I still think there's this weird undercurrent with the Steelers, people around the team that's when are they going to take some shots? I'm they're not. They're going to do the opposite of take shots. This is going to be a backup quarterback game plan that they really didn't do with Mitch Trubisky, but they probably should have. This is going to be what the Seattle Seahawks did with Drew Lock. You're going to throw one hard pass all game, and hopefully it wins it for us. That's where we're headed, I think, from a game plan perspective. You saw what the Steelers did against this Bengals defense 4 weeks ago with Kenny Pickett. It's not like he was, throwing the ball 40 yards downfield. It was all underneath stuff. Pat Freiermuth in the middle of the field. Just move the chains, keep it simple. Like that's all they really need to do in this game with this passing offense. They should be able to run the ball against the Bengals, especially with no DJ Reader.
Yeah.
And so I really think they can deliver the backup quarterback performance that they haven't gotten this year, that seemingly everybody in the league has had at least one of, right? There's been like 100 of these games this year where some backup comes in and wins a game, and you're like, how do the Steelers get how do all these teams get good performances out of Josh Dobbs and Aiden O'Connell and Nick Mullins and Jake Browning and all these people are winning games and having good games. The Steelers haven't even really had a good game out of Kenny Pickett this year. Like how?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this will probably be the game that they're able to get that kind of solid backup game out of Mason. The big question mark is they have to protect him. They have been so bad at protecting the passer these last few weeks, and Mason is not a fast quarterback. And more so than that, actually, I think he has like an underappreciated level of athleticism. If you remember that Lions game, he had like a 38-yard run. It was like the longest run of the season for the Steelers that year. I just think he's particularly like he's not that athletic and he's not that good at feeling the rush. I really feel like that has been the thing with Mason Rudolph throughout his career, is that like you just look at the pocket and you're like, oh, if it had just stepped up here, or if it had just felt this better. I don't know, maybe 2 years on the scout team, getting tag teamed by TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith will have beaten that skill into his brain. I don't know, but I feel like that's been the thing that's always held him back. He doesn't have a particularly fast release. He's not super accurate, short and medium. He's got to throw the ball down the field sometimes to be effective, but the more he holds on to the ball, the more trouble he gets into. And so I think, the way I see it is, if the Steelers can make this work, it's going to be because they get him into a rhythm. They take very few risks, but are able to complete passes over the middle, because that's where the Cincinnati defense can really be exploited. And if it doesn't work, I think it's because they can't protect him. Mason Rudolph on the move is a recipe for turnovers. And look, talked about how bad Mitch Trubisky has been at it, but Rudolph's thrown like 2.3% of his career attempts for interceptions. That's not a very good number either. Like he's perfectly capable of throwing the game away as well.
Yeah, well, that was the big number to me that jumps out going through this box score from his last start. 0 sacks in that game for the Detroit Lions in that one. You look at where the state of the Steelers offensive line, which in my opinion, just every week it seems like they're getting worse in pass protection. Going against the Cincinnati team with Hendrickson, with Hubbard. I know no DJ Reader, but they still got some other guys, maybe like a BJ Hill on the interior. There are some guys that can create some havoc for this Steelers offensive line, and that's going to be the biggest question to me. And the biggest, I'm not saying reason to not start Mason. I think that you had to go this direction with what you've seen from Mitch. But like at least Mitch is able to get outside of the pocket and keep himself from getting killed. Mason, I'm not saying he's a complete statue. We've talked about maybe a little bit of an underrated athlete even, but he doesn't offer that same mobility that, a healthy Kenny or a Mitch do possess. So I think that's the one thing that I'm like really concerned about is this offensive line going to hold up against the Cincinnati pass rush?
I'll go a step further. Like if they don't find a way to protect him better, or they don't call the game differently so that he's never holding on to the ball, we're going to end up seeing Mitch Trubisky again. Because if they protect Mason as well air quotes as they protected Mitch going to be back in the game, because like he's not going to start like he's going to get pummeled. They've got to do a better job.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about, we talked about maybe is there any other weaknesses you think that there are other than the lack of mobility from Mitch to Mason? Because we can talk about the pros too, but like the cons of making this move.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think Mason isn't probably like not quite as accurate as Trubisky. Although, like, look, Trubisky was playing so poorly that it's almost like if I roll out Mitch and Mason in a precision passing drill on a practice field right now, I believe Mitch would beat him. But like Mitch is throwing off one back foot, slinging it all over the place, missing guys left and right. So like, mechanics
have been a mess.
Yeah, I think I think this move is more honestly about that Mitch Trubisky's falling apart than it is like any real belief that Mason Rudolph is like better. It's just that
Sure.
Trubisky's not doing his job right now. He's not living up to his potential. And so, you go to a different guy, maybe you get a spark, maybe at least you get somebody that can take care of the football. I really think this game needs to be a statement for the Steelers defense. They have to find a way to keep the offense in this game. I assume there's going to be some significant rust on Mason Rudolph. Like,
yeah,
I have a hard time envisioning a first drive touchdown here, right? Like, he hasn't thrown a pass in a competitive game except for one swing pass to Pat Freiermuth for 3 yards since 2021. Like, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be incumbent on the defense to keep things tight early and find a way to let them work into this game.
Okay, and then in terms of things that you are potentially getting an upgrade on going from Mitch to Mason, obviously you mentioned maybe not taking as much care of the football as obviously Kenny has, but I think that I'm curious. You're mentioning not wanting to obviously take as many shots, just take care of the football like a quarterback game. But Mason does offer the best deep ball, in my opinion, of the entire room. So will they try to utilize that at all? Do they take a shot or two early just to see if they can catch Cincinnati sleeping?
I guess it depends on what the Bengals do on defense. Like the last game, the Bengals sat in cover 2 the whole game. So no,
Yeah.
I don't think that there's going to be the opportunities. Now, maybe the Bengals will do something differently since they got shredded by Pat Freiermuth in that game. But really, I mean, if I'm building a game plan against Mason Rudolph, I want him to do, like, you don't want to give him deep balls. Like, those are easy. It's interesting too. Like, he's never had a great connection with Deontay Johnson for whatever reason. Like, if you remember that 19 year when Rudolph was in, like, Deontay didn't do that much. He was really able to get the ball to James Washington. And that kind of felt like it. And I wonder if George Pickens can do that, or maybe is it Calvin Austin? Like, I don't know. I would be interested in, if they're going to run cover 2, run some stuff with Austin and Pickens at the same side and keep Pickens short and let Austin go long. And maybe he can lob a couple up there and see what happens. But I think in general, they're going to want to try to keep the football. They're not going to want to give the Cincinnati offense an inch. And I think they've got to win the field position battle. So I don't think it's going to be a whole lot of risks in this game, even though that is certainly the thing that Mason is the very best at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. Like you talked about connections that he could have with receivers. Obviously, maybe working with Calvin Austin a lot in practice because of not, being with the ones and stuff like that. But I think back to last year during the preseason, so the 2022 preseason, him and George Pickens connecting on a touchdown against the Seahawks in the preseason. There, they were working together because obviously Chase Claypool was still on the roster, so like George not working exclusively with the ones early on in the preseason and stuff like that. So maybe there is just more of a connection there than he ever has had with Deontay Johnson, just due to them really not seeing a ton of time together.
Yeah, I can see it. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think that's an interesting idea. The other thing I think I would like to see from the Steelers in this game is a little bit more 2 tight end. I feel like they kind of got away from that last week. And I know because Washington really did struggle against New England. But use Connor Hayward. Use Hot Rod. You have 4 of them. Like I think they need to continue to get Pat going and get him out into space and not have him tied to the formation so much. I really think that's a key for them.
Alan, after reading this full comment that I want to bring in here, we should have brought it up regardless of what it said, because this is a greeting that we are getting from Germany. So we appreciate you tuning in to Steelers Afternoon Drive all the way in Germany. Mr. Max Bruzgin, Bruzgin. What do you think? Bruzgin?
Brutzkin?
There we go.
Ich spreche ein keine Deutsch. I took it in high school. Brutzkin? I don't know. That doesn't look especially German to me, so I don't know. But
So also it kind of explains why maybe some of it was a little bit choppy, and I was kind of having to sift through the words here because they were using the translation to send it. But so we asked specifically for topics, obviously on the show and stuff, and they said, and this was before Kenny was officially rolled out, but if Kenny plays this week, even if he's clearly not at 100%, do you think that it is just so they have more tape on him to try to continue to decide in this offseason whether or not he is the guy to go with, or if they need to look elsewhere for a quarterback? Okay, so now taking into consideration that Kenny has been rolled out, it kind of changes this question a little bit for me. And it's like, we've talked about this too. It's like, this is why Kenny is pushing to play. Like, I think that he's not dumb. He knows the part of the evaluation process that he's in right now. He knows that this franchise is still trying to figure out if he is the guy and if he can be the guy going forward. And every rep that he can get is meaningful football. And obviously the competitive side of it for Kenny Pickett too. But yeah, I mean, that's why if he can go at any point, it's always been for me, let him go, because you were trying to evaluate this guy to figure out if he is the guy. Alan, where do you stand on this though? Like, are you kind of in the same boat, or did it make sense the entire time for him to sit down for this one, just coming off this ankle procedure?
I'd have been fine with him trying to play on crutches. Like, I get him out there, man. He's your guy. He wants to be out there. As long as he's not like, look, he's got to be able to move well enough to protect himself. He didn't look great in that regard when I saw him at practice this week. So I get it, but I mean, he's got to play if he can play. There's no, like, to my mind, doesn't matter if they lose. Like, so they can't be eliminated this week, even if they lose, no matter what else happens. But even if they were to get eliminated, I think they still got to play him. He needs to grow. He needs to develop. He is too much of an important part of this team's story going forward to let this potential development just go by without taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, did he, in your mind now, this is obviously, we don't know for sure how the Steelers view it, but like, did he become more valuable by not playing? The team obviously, like, he got hurt in right before half of that game against Cardinals. So 0-2.5 during that time, 0-3 really their record. But what's your take on that? Because I've seen a lot of people say that, like, there should be a greater appreciation for Kenny Pickett because of what the quarterback play was without him.
Well, I wrote a big story about this at SteelersNow.com about why and how the Steelers broke Mitch Trubisky and what it says about Kenny Pickett. Look, I mean, Mitch Trubisky in this offense was 10 points worse in passer rating than he was with the Chicago Bears, who were miserable then, like, and had an offense that was a laughingstock. And Matt Nagy was their head coach. So, yeah, I mean, I think it points to, look how bad Mitch is in this offense, and we know that Mitch is better than that. We know. We've seen it. We have lots of evidence. He started 55 games in the NFL. We know he's better than he's been playing in this offense. So you should know that Kenny Pickett can be better than he's playing in this offense. And so I think the comparison really has done a lot of good for Kenny in that regard. It should give some faith and some hope that there is a good bit more to his game. I mean, look, if you add 10 points of passer rating to Kenny Pickett, look, he's not great, but now all of a sudden you're talking about like a Ryan Tannehill kind of player where it's like, okay, maybe could you upgrade him if you like do everything exactly right? Yeah, but it's going to be kind of hard. It's not like the situation where they are now where people are talking about trading for Justin Fields or, doing something, trading up for Michael Penix, which I saw in a mock draft this week. Don't do that. Don't. We're going to talk about the draft a whole lot for 3 months, so I don't need to tease it. Don't do that. But yeah, I mean, I think his absence, what's the quote? Absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? Man, I think really Kenny Pickett has shown that as bad as things were going, it certainly could get worse without him, and it did.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't, I don't think that there was much question in your mind. There certainly wasn't in mine that he would get a shot with a different offensive coordinator for 2024. But I think that this just kind of, again, adds more evidence to that being the case. He deserves a shot with somebody else.
He deserves it. And look, even though he wasn't doing like great quarterback things, he was winning. And I think at the end of the day, one, that's the job. And two, also, like, when we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, like Mike Tomlin has, I think, to his fault, a lot of emphasis on results instead of process. Like he is that guy. I think that's why we had another season of Matt Canada, because the results down the end of the season were very, very good, right? If Kenny Pickett, here's an interesting thought, right? If Kenny Pickett had a 10-point higher passer rating the second half of the last season, but instead of the Steelers going 8-1, they went 4-5, do you think they would have brought Matt Canada back?
Ooh. I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I don't think so either, right? I think, look, this is a team that evaluates results over process all the time. So, yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about, what the Steelers are going to do, the fact that his backup is 0-5 in games that he's played in this year, 2 of those were starts. One of them he came in with the game tied. Now, Jacksonville, he came in with the game in reach. Houston, we're certainly not going to hold against Mitch Trubisky, but yeah, I think they're going to look at that and be like, hey, man, we got to give this guy a real chance with a much better offense.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that is so, again, we're going to have a bunch of time in the offseason to talk about this, but that's just why I'm so intrigued. I'm not completely wishing these last 3 games away or anything like that, but I'm very interested in the direction this goes offensively, specifically this offseason. Alan, tell the people where they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter, PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com, Steelers Now Plus, promo code 10% off using the code Allen10. Like and subscribe to YouTube channel, and that's it. You'll find me at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday, and then somewhere in there doing my Christmas shopping, probably on Christmas Eve. We'll see how that goes.
There we go. You can also find me at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday for Steelers Bengals. You can also find me on all my social media platforms at Zachary Smith PGH. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments. We want your topics. We want your questions, specifically questions, because we get a lot of people's thoughts on everything, and that's great. But hit us with some questions too, so we can come back to those tomorrow when we do predictions and stuff for the game. Leave us a 5-star review if you were listening somewhere else, Spotify, Apple, whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Until next time, for Alan Saunders, for myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers afternoon drive.